Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I have with me today Mr. Penpa Tsering. He is the new president of the Tibetan government-in-exile. He takes over from Dr. Lobsang Sangye. Welcome to ThePrint.
Thank you, Nayanima. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. So let me ask you first, let me congratulate you for this victory that you've had. We've had a new Sikyong after a very long time. After your winning, you've given certain speeches where you've mentioned that, of course, your first priority will be to look after the welfare of the Tibetan people and also to resolve this long-standing Sino-Tibetan conflict. Can you share your thoughts with us, please?
Yeah, the very reason why we are in exile is because of the communist China's occupation of Tibet. So the main responsibility of the Central Tibetan Administration is to resolve this Sino-Tibet conflict. The proposal for the middle way approach, which is mutually beneficial both for China and the Tibetan people and also for the geopolitical area, is the approach that we are following, and that is also approved by the Tibetan Parliament in exile. So we are trying to look at the reality of the situation, not the historical situation, and see whether common sense can prevail on the Chinese government. If they treat Tibetans also as part of China, then it is the responsibility of the Chinese government also to look after the aspiration of the Tibetan people. So far, we feel that the Chinese government failed to understand the real aspiration of the Tibetan people. The Chinese government believed that every problem can be resolved through development. And we have been practicing Buddhism over the last more than 1,300 years. And this is the essence of Tibetan culture. The Tibetan language also came from India. So what China is doing right now inside Tibet is the signification of Tibet by through demographic aggression and through other policies and programs that diminishes the importance of Tibetan language, which is reduced to just a language teaching, and also a lot of restriction on the Tibetan monastic institutions with surveillance, management committees filled with the local communist leaders, and then also when it comes to reincarnation of lamas, they have laid a rule. So these are gross interference into the Tibetan way of life, and this also amounts to a certain level of cultural genocide. So this is something that we have to deal with the Chinese government, and this is our first priority. And of course, the second priority is to look after the welfare of the Tibetans in exile.
Mm-hmm. If I can also ask you, since the time we've had the Tibetan government in exile had the first Sikyong, and now coming to you, a lot of things have changed in the world. I'm talking in terms of the global geopolitics. And now we also have a pandemic that is raging on, that is also sort of changing the kind of understanding we had of the global alliances and the understanding, right? So as a new Sikyong, do you think that your challenges have increased in a newer world? And if that is the case, how do you plan to address them?
It's the geopolitical situation and the belligerence of China in its neighborhood, not just in its neighborhood, but also with all the major Western democratic countries, is a real cause of concern. Everybody thought that if China develops, if China becomes part of the international community, there would be a more responsible global leader. But unfortunately, it has taken a back turn. China's belligerence with India on the border issue also is a major concern. So and also the pandemic has evolved the global dynamics. Looking at it, the issue of Tibet had also gained prominence within India because the sentiment of the Indian people were very much hurt by China's actions. So it's not just India, all countries around South China Sea, be it Vietnam, Brunei, Philippines, Malaysia, Taiwan, Japan, everywhere, there is a lot of concern about China's actions there. And this has created a sense of loss of security. And then so you see emergence of multilateral formations like the Quad and others, all because of China's action. And this I think the Chinese government have to understand that this is not the best way to create better relations with its neighbors. And this will take a long time for the wounds to be healed with its neighbors.
Mm-hmm. I'll come to the China issue in a larger, manner. But let me first also ask you, for the first time, we've seen reports coming out that there's been some kind of a constitutional crisis that has come within the CTA, the Central Tibetan Administration. You've said you plan to address them. That has put question mark on the strong unity that the Tibetan community has around the world. What do you have to say on that?
We are still a growing democracy. Our charter is only 115 articles strong, and out of that, also many have been some articles have been withdrawn. So all the rules and regulations could not be written in a format that independent countries have. That is why we have some issues. But this crisis has to be resolved by the present parliament.
Now coming to the Chinese Communist Party, right? Now this year it's going to mark the 100th year of the Chinese Communist Party, out of which they've been ruling for the last 70 years. So of course it has strengthened them a lot. They have become a larger, much more influential voice around the world. So in this kind of a scenario, how do you think you will be able to resolve the Tibetan conflict, which has been going on for so long? Will there be a new strategy that you'll be having? If you can share some of your thoughts on that.
Under President Xi Jinping, we see a lot of consolidation of power. In one way, that may be good for China, in the sense that one person controls the whole system. But on the other hand, that person also has to be responsible for any failures. So you have both good side and bad side to that. Now with the political clout they have, with the military power that they have, the only thing they lack is the moral power. And the only way they can gain moral power and trust of others, other governments and the people around the world is by being responsible. So if they want to be responsible, first they will have to address internal problems within the country. And that concerns Tibet, that concerns Uyghur, that concerns Mongolians, that concerns Hong Kong, and also its relations with Taiwan. So there are many issues they need to resolve. And China, as we know, is the only country who is spending more on internal security than external security. So that also reflects how much China is fearful of the sustainability of their regime. And the only thing, what we discussed earlier also, the only reason why China is being so belligerent towards neighbors and other countries is, the only reason I can see is that they are very fearful. And also because of the pandemic, if there are social unrest inside China, there may be a breakdown of the Communist Party. And, because of that, they want to instill nationalism within the Chinese public. And then that they don't have access, the Chinese people don't have access to information. Keeping people in dark, their own people in dark, that will not last very long, because this is digital age, and people want to know more, people want to be informed, and people also want to be responsible. People want to know who they're ruling and how they are being ruled. So to be accountable to the public is something that the Chinese government has to learn, and eventually it has to happen. There's no other way. Once this realization set in, then we feel that there should be a way, or more other leaders could be there to see this common sense and resolve the issues that confronts them internally and externally.
Interesting. Mr. Tsering, I also understand that one of your first priority would be to rope in the young generation of Tibetans, right, who may have not been aware of the root cause of the conflict, and now you plan to bring them all together. If you can share with our viewers what you plan to do on that.
No, the first 50 years of our struggle, our face to the international community has always been His Holiness the Dalai Lama. And because of his charisma, because of his thinkings, thoughts for global peace, universal responsibility, moral values, we have gained a lot of support. Now that His Holiness has devolved both his administrative and the political responsibilities, but he still focuses on the moral issues, interreligious harmony and all that. So now the responsibility and the reason why His Holiness introduced democracy in the Tibetan diaspora as early as 1960, just 1 year after coming into exile under very, very difficult circumstances, is to prepare the future generations of Tibetans to care for themselves. Now we have reached a stage. Just like me, I'm a very ordinary Tibetan farmer's son now who's assuming the leadership role within the Tibetan community. Just like me, I would expect the younger generations of Tibetans to take more responsibility.
You've been very close to His Holiness also, right?
Yes. Every Tibetan, whether young or old, still hold His Holiness very dear, and everybody knows that without him, we would have reached nowhere. Now, over the last 30 years, we have undergone a lot of social change. A lot of Tibetans have moved out from India, Nepal, and Bhutan, and from also within Tibet to Western countries. And now Tibetans are settled in more than 25 different countries where they have become citizens. They speak the language, native language. They understand the local politics. These are the potentials that we need to harness. And if we can harness those potentials to the optimum level, then we can multiply our advocacy network and our advocacy efforts towards governments, towards parliaments, towards the media, towards the think tank, and also general awareness about Tibet in the general population in the countries that the Tibetans reside. So this is a real potential that we have, and I intend to invoke the kind of responsibility that young Tibetans should be taking. And this will be, from my side, wherever I travel, I will make sure, even if it's 5 young Tibetans, I'll meet them separately and make them understand that we have an added responsibility, not like other people who are independent or independent citizens of independent countries.
I'm sure that will be very inspirational for them. So let me ask you, now coming to India, basically, the Indian government has been always supportive of the cause. We know the history, but do you think now is the time for India to probably do more, even during the elections that have happened now, from which you have emerged victorious? Do you think India supported that for a free and fair elections? And also, do you think that probably now that India is also aligned more towards the US, it is facing the Chinese wrath? Do you expect anything more from the Indian government that they should be doing now as things are changing?
Yes, Indian government, as His Holiness used to say, the first 50, 60 years have been very cautious or even overcautious when it comes to China or Tibet matters. Indian government and the people have been very, very generous in terms of extending humanitarian support for the Tibetans, but not so much on political sense. Now I sense this renewed urgency within the Indian leadership and also the intelligentsia or the academicians, that the policy that they have adopted towards Tibet or towards China has not been adequate. There needs to be a proper review, also because of what happened in Doklam and Galwan and all recent. Of course, incursions have been going on over many years, but what has been happening is more warlike situation that is being imposed by the Chinese government on the Indian military. So that I think kinds of puts a reset button on how India should approach the Tibetan issue. That so far Tibet issue was more for leveraging diplomatic ties or political ties with the Chinese government. Now I think there is a realization that Tibet issue cannot just be used as leverage, but the Tibetan issue need to be resolved. And that will be beneficial, not just only for China, but also for Tibetan people and also for the whole geopolitical region.
Mm-hmm. So if I can ask you, Ms. Tsering, how do you see the recent conflict that's been going on since for last 1 year, since April 2020? And, between India and China, I mean, the tensions that are still going on, we've seen some amount of disengagement has happened, but not fully, and it remains a challenge, of course. And also the fact that there's been a lot of clamor going on whether or not India should be reviewing its policy on the One China policy. What are your views on that?
You have a line of control, you have a line of actual control, you have no man's land, but much of the areas where there are conflicts are uninhibited areas. So now the question is as to why China is being so aggressive, why China is even willing to risk military tension into all this. That is why we always keep thinking, why is China doing all this? Because there's nothing much to gain in terms of land or, the all that. So the only reason is if there is a chaos, a social unrest, or political unrest in China, then they might undertake something like 1962 war, where then they will say, oh, all other nations around the world are being against us. Historically, they have been against us. Now they are doing this, and they try to instill nationalism. That seems to be the only reason why they are doing this. And why do you think China has not resolved the border issue with India for so many years, after so many rounds? They have resolved their border issue with Mongolia, with Russia, with every other country. And India and China, which is India-Tibet border, is more than 1,600 kilometers long. And that must be one of the longest non-porous border around the world. Why can't we have more people-to-people exchange in those borders? Why can't we have trade? Nantula was opened, but it led nowhere. Other borders are being closed more than being opened. So these are questions that keeps arising as to why is China doing all this? Because China has never treated India as an equal. Never, ever. They have never treated. And if countries like United States don't treat them equal, then they say, oh, they are being, they're taking the upper hand. They are not treating us equal. And they are treating the same thing with others. If United States is having trade war with China and sanctions and all that, they are doing the same thing with Australia and other countries wherever they have issues. So there is always this paradox, this irony of issues where they say something and then practice something else. So I think I really hope that better sense prevails in the Chinese leadership in the years to come, because this is not going to lead anywhere. This is not good for neighborly relations. This is not good for the whole geopolitical region. This is not good for the world. So they'll have to rethink their strategies, and then the kind of hurtful sentiment that has been even in India, within the Indian people, it will take a long time to heal, to have a positive view of China. This will take a long time just because of a small thing on the border, which does not gain any traction.
True. Now, if I can ask you, how do you see the role of US in all this on the Tibetan issue? We've seen how the Biden administration is now sort of, again, cracking down on some of the Chinese policies. We've seen what the Trump administration did. They've constantly talked about Chinese Communist Party and not China. That's been, the way they were talking. Now, amidst all of these, do you think you need to now put maybe larger pressure on the US, or that could be a separate strategy on how to push forward the Tibetan cause within the larger Biden administration?
If we look at American history and how they dealt with China, the Kissinger and Nixon were responsible for opening up China in the 1970s, and then the whole reason how China became so powerful was also mainly because of the Western nations. And during Clinton's time and during Bush's time or even Obama's time, the expectation was that if China becomes part of the international community, they would be more responsible. But the realization has set in within the US administration that this is not working. China is becoming more powerful, but more irresponsible, more immoral. So that is where now they feel that they should take a more hardline position. On the Tibet issue, it has always been there since 1987 when His Holiness addressed the US Congressional, the Human Rights Caucus on the 5-point peace plan till now. The support has been bipartisan. The support has been bicameral. It has been very consistent, and the depth of the support reflects in the kind of legislation they have passed from 2002, which was amended last year in 2020, and the kind of financial support also they extend to us. The reciprocal access to Tibet they adopted. So there are many levels, and we are very fortunate that in the United States, when it comes to Tibet issue, that is the only time when both parties come together, Democrats and Republicans. Now you also have the Uyghur issue and Hong Kong issues where it's common interests of the both the parties to support, and we still continue to have very good relation. Speaker Pelosi has been very supportive. She is still in the chair. And I really look forward to working with and I really appreciate the State Department for tweeting their congratulations to me, and their wish also, and I intend to follow that up with them. And there are many things that we need to take up with them in terms of working with other like-minded countries, including India. And I'm sure India will play a leading role when it comes to that. And with European countries, with Australia, Japan, all democratic countries who believe in justice, in truth, and in who believe in the democratic values.
Mm-hmm. If I can now finally ask you, and that's going to be my last question, we are now seeing China taking an active interest in the succession plan of His Holiness Dalai Lama. And they are stating that, as if they already have a plan and that's how they'll be going forward. What do you have to say on that? Do you think they have the right to do so? We've seen in the past what has happened. What do you have to, your thoughts on that?
They always believe that they have a plan, even with Panchen Lama also. So the Panchen Lama, recognized by His Holiness the Dalai Lama, was abducted just a few days after His Holiness recognized Tendichu Nayanima as the reincarnation. And they appointed their own Panchen Lama, who is not respected by the international community, who is not respected by the Tibetans inside Tibet. So they know that whatever they do, it will not be respected. That is why they keep pushing, saying that Tibet was part of China since time immemorial, or the Dalai Lama's reincarnation has been chosen through the golden urn. But that is not true. The golden urn was introduced in 1793, but it was practiced only on one Dalai Lama, the 11th Dalai Lama. All other Dalai Lamas had been chosen through the ritual process of Tibetan Buddhism. And every one of us know that China is a communist country. It's an atheist country who doesn't believe in religion. But the irony of the whole thing is they want to be responsible for the reincarnation of the 14th Dalai Lama. While they don't respect the existing 14th Dalai Lama, they want to come up with the 15th Dalai Lama. And His Holiness had also jokingly said several times that if Chinese government is really serious about recognition of reincarnation of lamas, then they should study Buddhism. And if they are really interested about reincarnation, they should look for Mao Zedong's reincarnation first, and then Deng Xiaoping's reincarnation second, then maybe the Dalai Lamas. So it's an irony of things that this will not work out. And the focus is why they want to look for the 14th Dalai Lama's reincarnation, the 15th. It's only for political reasons. Everybody knows that. But this is not going to happen because His Holiness said that I'm going to be born in a free country.
Sure, but just a short question. I understand that there's no way that you'll be recognizing the Chinese plan, whatever they have in mind. But do you have a plan? Is there a plan that is there? Because His Holiness is now probably trying to go on to a different kind of role that he wants to play.
The role that His Holiness is playing it has been there from the time he first traveled outside in 1963 onwards, for global peace, for universal responsibility, for environment, responsibility of our environment, for interreligious harmony, anything that has an element of conflict within humanity, he wants to be part of the solution. And that His Holiness has always been playing. And with regards to dealing with China, whenever the Chinese government is willing, even though His Holiness has devolved all his political and administrative responsibilities, I believe that he will play a very proactive role in this issue. As a citizen of Tibet and as a senior of Tibet. And in our case, in the charter, we designate His Holiness as our refuge, as our symbol. So he still represents us. He's a free spokesperson of the Tibetan people, and he is the only person who commands respect from both inside Tibet and outside Tibet. And I think it would be for the best interest of China to resolve the Tibet issue when His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama is alive, because he will be the only person who can convince the Tibetans inside Tibet that the middle way approach is the best approach, best solution for the Tibetan cause, and to resolve the Sino-Tibet conflict.
Sure, Ms. Tsering, thank you so much for giving us your time, and thank you for talking to ThePrint. Please take care.
Thank you so much, Nayanima.